What's going on, guys? SasDood here. You can just call me Saz. I hope everyone is having a great day. Today we have a book review slash overview, whatever you want to call it, and that is on Conan the Barbarian, the movie novelization. My camera is mirrored right now, but yes, I do have the original 1982 publication of the movie, written by Lynn Carter and L. Sprague. And today I just want to talk about some differences from the novel and the movie, as well as some things I liked and I disliked. In the background here, I've got the original Conan the Barbarian film, the 1982 film, going on in the background, as I thought it'd be, nice to just play that in the background. I bought the complete Quest collection with Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer from a local store. So that's just going to be on in the background while we talk. To go over really quick about Conan the Barbarian, Robert E. Howard wrote Conan the Barbarian in the 1930s. Conan the Barbarian was made because Robert E. Howard was writing his Cole story, By This Axe I Rule, and that story got rejected by his publisher, and he rewrote that story into what we now know is the Phoenix on the Sword, the well-known and famous King Conan story that is a very good introduction to the world of Conan and Conan the Barbarian as a whole, right? Now, after Robert E. Howard died in the 1930s, in 1932, he had a lot of efforts from other publishers after he died to rekindle the flame that was his stories, and most famously Lynn Carter and L. Sprague de Camp. They would take the mantle of that effort. They would take his bits and pieces, and they would take his stories, they would take his unfinished stories and extend them, and Conan would find his place amongst new fans and diehard fans alike. Now, other authors such as Carl Wagner, Robert Jordan, and John Maddox Roberts would also contribute their own takes to the Conan mythology, but besides the novelization, I've never read anyone else's books on, their take on Robert E. Howard's books besides this novelization. And this will be just like I said, a general overview and some differences between the film and the novel. So there's going to be spoilers for the book and the novel, right? I got this off of eBay for $8. Like I said, original publication by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter, based off the screenplay by John Milius and Oliver Stone. There are modern reprintings. I believe they reprinted it in 2011. And in 2023, I think the 2023 reprint was by Penguin House Publishing, something like that. But anyways, let's start with the similarities and differences, right? Both the movie and the book are very familiar. The main difference between the movie script and the book is that the book has obviously a lot more in depth. It goes into more in-depth scenes. For instance, the village scene is more in-depth. Conan has more of a back and forth dialogue with his father than in the movie, but we still don't get anything from his mother, right? His mother is very absent in both the film and the book. There's probably even less of her in the book than there is in the film, to be honest. Excuse me. The main story beats are all there. The village gets raided, mother and father die, Conan gets forced into slavery. He turns into a pit fighter, trained warrior and swordsman. He escapes. They find a witch. He finds the witch, finds Subotai, etc. Right? Main story beats are all there. Just a little bit more in depth in the book, and some things are worse in the book, and some things are a little worse in the movie. Right? The most interesting sections I found in the book is the more in-depth look at Conan's time as a pit fighter and as a slave, and his and Subotai's romps in the city of Zamora, right? Most scenes are barely different, such as Subotai, Conan, and Valeria's ascension into the Tower of Set to steal the Jewel of Set, the Gem of Set. the wit scene, the final battle, right? So those scenes aren't very different from the movie and kind of follow the movie beat for beat. I also was confused sometimes by the descriptions in the book, but that might be more of an issue on my part because I have struggles visualizing written word and when I'm drawing, visualizing the image in my head. So that might just be a me thing, but I think that that's the case with most like action scenes. If it's not like on a film or whatever, it's very hard to imagine it. Just, you know, just how it is. So I can't really deduct it from the book since that might be an issue on my part, right? Um, Conan, he has the same backstory as a Subotai and Thulsa Doom. There is a little bit more in depth with Valeria. They reveal that she was a pit fighter, and we get a little bit more in-depth look at the King of Zamora, I believe. If he's the King of Zamora, Shadazar and Zamora. I believe it is Zamora. Near the end of the film, I say film, I mean novel, and his daughter, the daughter of Zamora. But that's about it. Rexer and Thorgram, they have even less presence in the novel than they do in the movie. And what's changed at the Mountain of Power in the book is the introduction of the Beastmen, which is described as like a lesser evolutionary chain of man. Like they're like the offshoot of man that didn't really take to the light so well, so they live underground. But Rexer and Thorgram, I barely remember them from the movie, to be honest. Like they're just there to be the right hand man of Thulsa Doom. They don't really do much besides Conan fighting them at the Mountain of Power and at the Mound of the Dead, I believe it's called. I also found it very confusing when Conan died, whether or not, I mean, Conan died in the book compared to the movie, because in the movie, when Conan's nailed on the Tree of Woe, Subotai, the way it's filmed, the way that it is framed, is that Subotai is coming up and down over the desert mirage, over the desert hills, right? And Conan looks up and sees him running, right? And then he looks down and he looks back and Subotai is gone, and that's when he dies, right? He died believing that it was a desert mirage, but in the film, I keep mixing up. In the novel, I mean, Subotai just rolls up with a horse and rescues him and brings him back to Valeria. And it's one of the best scenes in the film that was very lackluster in the novel. And in the novel, like in the film, they bring him back to Akiro, Mako, and Valeria pleads with Mako to, well, before this, Conan, in and out of consciousness, and he's crucified, right? He has holes in his hands. He's been beaten by the sun, malnourished, no water, no nothing. And Conan, when he, in his bout of consciousness, he wakes up and he realizes he can't even hold a sword anymore. And he remarks to himself that without the sword, he might as well be a nobody. He might as well not even be, alive, because he can't fight. And I found that very weird for the character of Conan. Conan, as we know, is like a ponderer. He's not just a barbarian. He's a thievesman. He's a swordsman. He's a lover. He's a fighter. He's crafty. He's a king. He knows multiple languages. He knows the art of war and things like that. And he's just much more than a swordsman. And him saying that was kind of like a little weird to me, to be honest, because that's not really who he is. But anyways, like I said before that, Valeria pleads with Akiro to bring Conan back, but Conan isn't dead. He doesn't die in the novel. He's just very weakened, and maybe if he was left, 99% chance if he was left to his injuries, he would have died anyways. But in the novel, she pleads with him, with Akiro, and Akiro obliges, and the whole scene where she fights off the ghost and the ghost try to take Conan. And that's the same as the film, but what was written weird is after that scene is successful and Conan is healed, it's written literally that Akiro looks at Valeria in pity, which I think is a weird thing to write, because why is he pitying her? The ritual worked and they all head off to the Mountain of Power after that. Maybe it's because they're trying to mix the movie and the novel, where Akiro tells Valeria that she'll have to pay one way or another. The gods will get their get back or whatever, right? But it's never really explained why he pities her. It's because she's married to a guy, not married, but loves a man who is basically, forced to fight. I don't know. Another big difference in the scenes is when Conan escapes his jailer, and the escape is totally different from the film. But it's when he comes across the cave, when he's chased by the wolves, and he comes across the Atlantean sword. He takes the Atlantean sword in both versions, but in the novel, he takes the sword, and the Atlantean giant skeleton comes alive, and he fights it off for like a couple of pages, and then he kind of just leaves. And just a really weird scene, because as we know in Conan, it's a low fantasy setting. There's necromancy and things like that, and dark magic that requires lifetimes, hundreds of years, if not eons, and you have to sacrifice your entire being just to study the basics of dark magic. And then Conan just walks in the cave, grabs a sword, and he fights the skeleton, and he wins. And then he comes out and comes across the witch, and kind of just diminishes the aspect a little more that he comes across a giant skeleton, which kind of defeats kind of the whole grounded purpose of the early portion of the film and of the novel, because we just got off of the scenes where he's traveling around in the novel and being trained to be a fighter, as a pit fighter, right? But adding on to that, a big difference is his escape and his pit fighter background, right? So the escape in the film is the guy just lets him go, right? After he does some pit fights. But in the novel, he has sex with a girl. The girl pays the jailer, kind of like in the movie, but in the movie it's framed as like the girl is forced to have sex with him. But in the novel, though, a rich woman pays the jailer for a night with Conan, and he has sex with her, and he awakes to an earthquake, and the earthquake dislodges his jail cell in the cave that he's in, and he runs out, and he sees the jailer. The jailer is stuck in the earth. He's been swallowed up by the earth, and the jailer's like, "I'll give you freedom, blah blah blah," and Conan's like, "Why would I save you?" And then he just runs off, leaves the jailer to die, and he grabs some equipment, and then he goes to the cave, and then he runs into the witch and frees Subotai, right? So a big difference between the movie and the novel. But speaking about that whole pit fighter slave experience, I very much enjoyed his time, which is a weird thing to say. I very much enjoyed the in-depth look, rather, at Conan's time as a child on the Wheel of Pain and his journey across the lands as a pit fighter, because it goes very much in depth, as does the Zamora scene with Subotai and Conan and Valeria. In Zamora, right, Subotai and Conan, they go around, they mess with the city looking for a symbol of Thulsa Doom, and Valeria as a pit fighter, her background info as a pit fighter. So the first half follows very very closely with the film, but the second half, not so much. Well, I should reword that. The first half is more interesting. It's actually the opposite. It's the opposite. The first half goes more in depth into stuff the film doesn't go in depth with, right? Kind of leaves it to the imagination, and it's more interesting as a result. Meanwhile, the second half of the novel kind of just goes on rails and is barely different to the um and it's not very different to the movie, right? It's a very much an on rails section, besides a few scenarios here and there, like the Beastmen, and a little bit more dialogue with the princess and seeing what happened to the King of Zamora. So if we were to talk about the things I very much enjoyed, was, like I said, his in-depth look, the Sprague de Camps and Lynn Carter's very in-depth look as a pit fighter and the fights he had. I really like Conan and Subotai's romp in Zamora, and I like Valeria's background as info as a pit fighter. I like how the king gets a little bit more information on what happened to him after the film, or rather during the novel when they're rescuing the King of Zamora's daughter. We get a little bit more dialogue with the daughter. And what I do like is at the end of the novel, spoiler alert, Conan rescues the daughter, obviously. And she asks him to be her king on the throne of Zamora. And he denies, saying that, he wants to form his own kingdom and not have it given to him, which is pretty faithful to Conan the Destroyer and his original opinions in the novels, right? He's been offered king and an advisor and things like that in the novels, in so many stories, and he always denies it, right? And obviously he only loves Valeria, so he doesn't want to betray Valeria. Overall, I don't think this book is much of a must read for Conan fans, nor does it tell much of a different story than the film. First half, pretty interesting. Second half, pretty on rails to how the film is. I much prefer the film, as you see in the back here, and I think most fans would as well. There's not really any other actor for Conan like Arnold, and there's not really any other director for Conan other than John Milius. Even I don't want to discount Dino De Laurentiis's take on Conan. They obviously were in a bind with the PG rating and Universal, and I do like Raphael De Laurentiis's take alongside with John Milius's. She's the daughter of Dino, I believe. But yeah, hopefully we get like a third Conan film. Maybe not, probably not. Anyways, not a big fan of DeCamp and Lynn Carter's writing style. There's not really anything comparable to Robert E. Howard. There isn't a human being on this planet Earth that can compare to how Robert E. Howard wrote Conan and how he described Conan. And just not even just Conan, just Solomon Kane and Bran McMorn and Call, like that whole genealogy of from him from 1920 to 1932, his 12-year career. There's not really a human being like him. I would say if you got some time to spare and you got $10, like I said earlier, you can get the old publication of this book, which I have here, 1982. It's like all worn out and yellowed, and it's got stickers and stuff like that. There is a semi-new republishing in 2011. I don't know who republishes it. And I think Penguin House republished it recently in 2023. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong. But anyways, this was a bit more of a long-winded thing. I tried to script it out, and I had some bullet points up on the screen here. So hopefully you can forgive me if I mess some things up or I go into some weird tangents about the novel. But anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you wish to support my artwork and my videos, all my social media and payment tipping links are in my profile. More videos and artwork will come regardless. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye for now.